we've been talking about five elements, and more particularly, we've been talking about the generating cycle yesterday. So the generating cycle in the five elements is that clockwise cycle where the previous element generates the next element. So let me just pull that up real quick. Oops, that's the wrong button here. Let's see. Okay. All right. So here's the five element chart. Hopefully you're getting very familiar with this illustration. So if we look at the clockwise, so we can see this goes clockwise, where wood gives birth or generates fire, okay, like fuel for a fire, and fire generates earth. So think about when you burn something, those ashes, they actually become earth, right? And that becomes very nutritious for say, farming. And then earth generates metal. So think about mining like a mountain for metal. Okay, that's one way to look at it. And then one way to look at metal generating or giving birth to water is like metal collecting water. And maybe one visual you can think about is when you get to your car in the morning and you see all this dew on your car. Okay, so that metal surface, because it cools down with the science behind it, okay, it actually makes dew. The water from the air gets captured and becomes water on your car. But so metal collects water, and then water gives birth to wood. I mean, if you're a gardener, you know that all your plants need water. So that's the whole generating cycle. So we talked a bit more about how water feeds the wood and how wood feeds the fire. So how does fire generate or nourish the earth, right? So the earth personality, its gift and its challenge is that it can be very stubborn. Okay, think about earth being very grounded and also unmovable at times. So you can do all you want to convince some earth person to change their mind. They may not want to or let you do that. For both good and bad. Like if they're protecting you, you really appreciate that earth person being totally immovable and unchangeable. But of course, if you're trying to change their mind, you're not on their side, it becomes extremely difficult and frustrating. So the fire being what we say the parent of earth, adds that spontaneity. So it's quite the opposite in a way. Whereas earth tends to be very pattern oriented and very stable, very predictable. Fire on the other hand, tends to be more spontaneous in the moment. So for the earth person, that can be a great help sometimes, because sometimes they can't get out of their own way. And so that fire can really get that earth moving a little bit, budging a little bit, getting into the fun and the joy of life instead of just about the caring, and that stuff's important too, but really enjoying life, because that's the other thing that's the other challenge of earth, is that they're good at taking care of other people, but they may not necessarily be good about taking care of themselves. And so that fire, that fun really can remind them that, hey, they can have some fun too. They can enjoy life. They can connect with others. It's not just about taking care of everybody else. It's also important to take care of myself. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. So how does earth generate or nourish metal, right? So we think about metal, we look at that strive for perfection, that aloofness, and they tend to be a little bit more of loners instead of the more gregarious type, like a fire person would be. So with metal, it's sometimes they just really need a hug. Okay, sometimes that cool exterior sort of puts you off, but sometimes that earth comes in and just wants to take care of you, and actually the metal really enjoys that. They may not really say it, but it really gives them a boost. So so that's a little bit insight on how we nourish the fires. Nourish the metal. if someone's very much into their cutting people off and being distant, sometimes you just go in there and give them a hug regardless. So that's a good way. All right, so let's look at how metal generates or nourishes the water. Okay, so water tends to be, okay, so fire, I'm going to contrast this. So fire tends to be a bit scattered, right? Going up, and you can look at the characteristics of flame. Water can tend to be scattered in a way too. If you dump water on a surface, it just goes everywhere, right? But it's different. It's not scattered in the same way. There's a certain flow and tendency with water. It tends to, what it's doing is trying to go back to its source. But sometimes water needs a container, all right, to help it give it a little bit direction. So the metal, because it contains water, right? It's like a container, and that sometimes that separation, that aloofness, is also a containment, and so that can help the water out a lot in terms of organization and focus. So that's I think that's all 5 elements we covered now. Okay, so you start to see that each element needs another element to help it. Okay, because none of these elements, even though I say that fire is really the only element that really can sustain itself, all of these elements do better, right, with the help of others. And that's what I really want to emphasize here, is that we all have gifts, we all have challenges, but you know, don't try to just do everything on your own. You have other people that can help you, that are totally willing to help, and there's a synergy that happens if you put different elements together that are greater than the sum of its parts. So that's all I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk a little bit more tomorrow about emotionally how that works with this generating cycle, and then I want to get into the control cycle. Okay. So thank you for joining me and joining Mary Frances. Again, congratulations if you've been with us since the beginning. You've completed 8 weeks of Qigong. If you haven't gotten there yet, please keep it up. We all can do it. So this is kind of evidence that we have. And if you need to catch up, our videos are on YouTube. So again, have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow at 8:15.